Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach. We've officially made it to the month of July, which means NFL training camps start later this month. And with that being the case, I just wanted to go over some of my sleeper teams for the 2025 NFL season. Basically, my definition of a sleeper is a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, or came off of a very down year last year, and teams that I think have the talent and the potential to either make a playoff, get a playoff spot this season, or towards the end of the year be competing for playoff spots. So I'm going to kick it off with the AFC in this video, and either later this week or at some point next week, I'm going to do my sleeper teams for the NFC. The first team that I want to talk about for the AFC is the New England Patriots, and they aren't really much of a sleeper right now. As tons of people have been hyping them up throughout free agency and the offseason and the draft, but they do meet my criteria because they came off of a 3-4 win season last year. They had the number 4 overall pick. They've had 2 very bad seasons in a row, and I'm a Patriots fan, so I really wanted to talk about them. But so for the New England Patriots, some of their key additions they made in the offseason, obviously bringing in Mike Vrabel to be their head coach after firing Gerard Mayo, and bringing in offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. And people may groan and complain about Josh McDaniels and his coaching ability, but he's a very good offensive coordinator, and he's an offensive coordinator that brought the best out of Mac Jones when they were both in New England together. Now, as for players that they brought in during the offseason, they're key players. There's a bunch on offense and a few on offense and defense that they brought in to help bolster this team. But their main key players, they brought in defensive lineman Milton Williams from the Philadelphia Eagles in free agency, who is somebody that can help bolster their defensive line, hopefully be next to Christian Barmore, who's hopefully healthy this season, and they can be a real threat up the middle of that defensive line. They also brought in cornerback Carlton Davis to put on the opposite side of Christian Gonzalez, who is arguably a top 5 to top 3 corner in the NFL, to can bolster their very good cornerback room. They brought in edge rusher Harold Landry from the Titans, who they can hopefully put him on the opposite side in that front seven, in the pass rush position opposite of Keon White, and you have a pretty scary pass rush with Keon White, Milton Williams, hopefully a healthy Christian Barmore, and Harold Landry. They also brought in linebacker Robert Spillane from the Raiders, who is very much a do-it-all linebacker, sideline-to-sideline linebacker who can drop back in coverage, he can play the run. He's just a very good all-around linebacker who I think can fill unfortunately, they let Juwan Bentley go in the offseason to bring in Robert Spillane. I think Robert Spillane can fill that Juwan Bentley role in terms of leadership, and there are a few things that he does better on the field than Bentley did, especially in pass coverage. I think he will be a great addition to this defense. Now, offensively, their biggest acquisition was wide receiver Stephon Diggs. He is coming off of a torn ACL last season, but if he's healthy, he's easily the best wide receiver in this receiving core. He can bring a veteran leadership and can hopefully, if healthy, be a difference maker for this offense. They also brought in wide receiver Mac Hollins from the Bills, who is a very talented receiver. He's a very good receiver. He's very different from what they have basically any other receiver on the roster. Mac Hollins is about 6'4", a big red zone threat type of guy. And every other receiver they have is around 6 feet or shorter. So he's the only real big body guy they have that can add an extra element, an extra dimension to this offense, especially as they get close to the red zone. They brought in also some much needed offensive line help. They brought in offensive tackle Morgan Moses, who they can put at right tackle, which allows them to move Mike Onwenu back to his more natural position of right guard to really help beef up the right side of their offensive line. And they brought in center Garrett Bradbury, who hopefully can play well. He did have some struggles with pass coverage, especially when he was with Minnesota. We'll kind of see how he plays, and maybe there's a possibility if he doesn't pan out center, maybe they can move him to guard to still find a way to help that offensive line, and he can still find a way to be a part of and help that O-line. Now, there's also a few players that I'm really excited for they got in the draft, all of them offensively. First off is wide receiver Kyle Williams, who they drafted in the 3rd round. This wide receiver out of Washington State is very explosive. He's a little bit on the smaller side, but he can really play wherever you need him to, outside, in the slot. I think Josh McDaniels will find really creative ways to get him the ball in terms of like screen plays, trick plays, anything just to get the ball in his hands. Because once he has the ball in his hands, he is very explosive and he's very good at making plays. Also, their other 3rd round draft pick, they drafted center Jared Wilson, who, if Garrett Bradbury doesn't really work out at center, they have a guy who was the top center prospect in this year's draft class that they can plug in, and hopefully he can perform well. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in the O-line. They also brought in running back Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, who is always a big play threat waiting to happen. He's somebody that fits the mold of a lot of former New England Patriots, like 3rd down pass catching backs. Think of like Deion Lewis's, James White's, guys of those nature that you can pass them the ball, you can hand them the ball off every once in a while, but you just find ways to get them the ball and they're going to make plays. And I'm excited to see what Travion Henderson can do in this offense and with this Josh McDaniels calling the plays for him. And finally, the one that I'm most excited for is offensive tackle Will Campbell. Hopefully he can come in and be the long-term answer that we've been missing at left tackle. We haven't really had a long-term answer at left tackle since Nate Solder left. So I'm really excited to see what he can do, and hopefully he can anchor this offensive line. So the Patriots, brought in lots of talent. They still have Drake May at quarterback. He's a very talented quarterback. I think one of the things that helps them out is, as they are looking at they're getting better, the Dolphins and the Jets, who are also in their division, look to be maybe getting a little bit worse. So I think the Patriots have a chance to be better than both those teams. And, I don't know how they're going to do against the Bills or how they're going to be in standings versus the Bills, but I do think that they can at least finish 2nd in the AFC East. And with that, they can definitely compete with this roster for a playoff spot. Next sleeper team that I have is the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars, coming off a very down season last year, wound up picking top 5 in the NFL draft. Their main additions, one, they brought in head coach Liam Cohen, who had been the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Baker Mayfield had his best season last year. In terms of players, they brought in Giammi Brown, who's a very good depth piece at wide receiver for them. Offensive lineman Patrick McCarry to help shore up that offensive line for Trevor Lawrence. They brought in cornerback Jordan Lewis from the Cowboys, who is a very good cover corner. I think he's very good in the slot. And their top draft pick, who they actually traded up from 5 to 2 to get, in Travis Hunter, who can play both wide receiver and corner. He played at a very high level in college. He won the Heisman Trophy last season, playing at a very high level on both sides of the ball. So this team is very talented, but I think that their success will be mainly determined by how well Trevor Lawrence performs. If he can really, take the next step, if he plays like he did back in 2022 when they went to the playoffs and beat the Chargers in the playoffs, then this team is very much a playoff team, and he has some pretty good talent around him. They have their 2nd-year wide receiver, Brian Thomas, who they drafted last year in the 1st round, who had a very good rookie season, over 1,000 yards, was their number 1 target. It looks like he could still be the number 1 target this year. And really wait to see what they can do in the run game, because they have some pretty talented running backs in Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, and a couple of rookies that are very talented, and Bashal Tutin and LaQuint Allen, who they're both very talented. So wait to see really what they can do and really see how far Trevor Lawrence can take this team and what is maybe a make or break season for him in terms of what he looks like and how people perceive him for the rest of his career. And one of the things that really helps the Jaguars and is the fact that they play in the AFC South, which is not, one of the best divisions. There's the Texans at the top, and the Texans are kind of, maybe trending down. The Texans lost a bunch of their best offensive linemen. Their, O-line struggled last year, and they got looks like their O-line could be even worse this year. And I think, but Jacksonville has to deal with my next sleeper team, which is the Indianapolis Colts, who are also in the AFC South. So, they're going to play each other twice this year. The Colts are another very talented team. This year, their main key additions in the offseason was bringing in cornerback Charvarius Ward, and then in the draft, drafting Tyler Warren, who is arguably the best tight end prospect in this draft. He's somebody that you can move all around and have him do a little bit of everything. And they drafted defensive end JT Tuimoloau, who add to a very good defensive front. This team, as I mentioned, is very talented. Offensively, they're very talented with running back Jonathan Taylor. Wide receivers Josh Downs and Michael Pittman are very talented, very good receivers. You can throw Tyler Warren into there to help boost that receiving game. And defensively, they are actually more talented than I thought on defense. To look through the roster, and it's like, they actually got some pretty good guys. Defensive ends, they have Kwity Paye and their first-round pick from last year, Laiatu Latu. It was a very hyped prospect and played pretty well last year as a rookie. At defensive tackles, they have DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, who are very good. DeForest Buckner very good at getting after quarterbacks from that defensive tackle position. So this front four is very talented. At linebacker, they have Zaire Franklin, and they have very good safety in Kenny Moore. So very talented defense, very talented offensively with a bunch of offensive talent pieces. But their biggest question is quarterback. And we really have to wait and see if Anthony Richardson can be the quarterback they thought he could be. He's got all the talent in the world, great arm talent, great ability to run, but he doesn't have very good accuracy, and he's dealing with a shoulder injury right now that kept him out of minicamp. So if Anthony Richardson isn't able to go, they brought in Daniel Jones in the offseason to kind of compete for that starting job. And if Daniel Jones plays, like he did back in 2022, with the Giants, when, he didn't put up great numbers, but he didn't turn the ball over. And I think that's what this team needs, is a quarterback that can do just enough to move the ball, but be able to, hold on to it, be able to not turn the ball over, don't put their offense in bad positions. And I think if they have a quarterback that can just kind of be a game manager for them and then make plays when needed, this is a team that can compete for possibly, them and the Jaguars could possibly compete for the AFC South if the Texans start to slip. But I definitely see them as a team that can compete for a playoff spot as well as the Jaguars. The next team that I want to talk about is the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are a team I actually talked about last year in a Sleepers video. Maybe I was just a year off with them, but I was really excited to see what they could do last year. They ultimately underperformed. Another team that brought in a new head coach. They brought in Pete Carroll, who is, he's a proven winner in the NFL. He's got a Super Bowl. He's very good at building defenses. He's a player's coach. He's always very hyped up, very energetic. Somebody that's in his 70s. So I don't know how he does it, but he has all kinds of energy, and players just love playing for him. Some of their key additions as well, bringing in quarterback Geno Smith from the Seahawks, who I think will be an upgrade over Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, who they had last season, to really help out this offense. They brought in linebacker Jermaine Pratt and safety Jeremy Chin to really help, sheer up that front seven That linebacker core with Jermaine Pratt and Jeremy Chin, very talented safety, can really help out in the back end of that defense. And in their draft, they drafted the best running back prospect going into this season, and running back Ashton Jeanty, and they brought in a very talented receiver in Jack Beck. Ashton Jeanty should be a huge improvement over what they had last season in the run game with Zamir White and Alexander Madison. So that should really help them out, especially because they have a very good offensive line. So Ashton Jeanty should have a very good season. And you got Jack Beck, who you can be a very good number 3 receiving option behind Jacoby Myers, who is their top receiver, who is a very consistent receiver, who's very good, and tight end Brock Bowers, who was arguably the best tight end in the NFL last season as a rookie. So I think this offense can perform very well, especially with a veteran like Geno Smith back there. And then defensively, just adding those pieces in Jermaine Pratt and Jeremy Chin is very helpful. They're also going to be getting back a healthy Christian Wilkins, who's going to be on the same defensive line as Max Crosby, who is a top 3, top 5 defensive or edge rusher in the NFL. One of the things that really holds the Raiders back is how tough their division is. Where they have the Chiefs. They had 3 teams make the playoffs from their division last season, with the Chiefs who made it to the Super Bowl, the Chargers, and the Broncos. And the Broncos look to have gotten better in the offseason. The Chargers, you never really know from year to year how they're going to look, but they look like they've gotten a little bit stronger in the offseason, a little bit better in the offseason. So I think the Raiders are a team that can compete, but the only thing really holding them back is their division. But I do think they can play. They're going to do pretty well, and would not surprise me if they were competing for a playoff spot at the end of the year. Now, the last team I want to talk about is not so much a sleeper team, but what I'm going to categorize as a boom or bust team is that they are a team that has enough talent to make the playoffs. They were in the playoffs just a couple years ago, but it's honestly more likely and would be less surprising if they finish dead last or finish close to last in the entire NFL. And that team is the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have a bunch of talent. They have Kevin Stefanski, head coach, who's been a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year. Have good coaching. On defense, they've got a defense that a couple years ago was a top defense in the league. They've got Myles Garrett, a defensive end, who's again one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. In the first round of the draft, they drafted defensive tackle drafted Mason out of Michigan, who next to Garrett Wilson should have a very good role in this offense. Mason Graham should have a very good role in this defense and should really be able to help pressure quarterbacks, especially with Garrett Wilson taking a bunch of pressure off of him. And offensively, their offensive line has been good, but is banged up, was banged up last season. In the receiving game, they've got Jerry Jeudy, who's a good receiver. They've got Cedric Tillman, who's a very explosive receiver, but unfortunately he suffered injuries last season and had a concussion that kept him out for the back half of the season. At tight end, they've got David Njoku, who's an athletic freak, but unfortunately he's had some injury issues. And they've got a pretty good 3 running back tandem with Jerome Ford, who is kind of a running back that can really do a lot of things well, but doesn't really do anything too great. He's a good but not great running back that can really do whatever you ask of him, really do whatever the offense needs. And they also drafted Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State, who is an absolute powerhouse running back that has breakaway speed. He ran a sub 4.40. He's got absolute freak speed for his size. And they drafted Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, who is a smaller back who also has that breakaway, big play speed, can bust a big play at any moment. But this team will only do as well as their quarterback. And their quarterback situation is a mess right now. They brought in the offseason Joe Flacco, who is close to 40 years old, and 2 years ago, when he got playing time for them, helped bring them to the playoffs, and then played just terrible in the playoff game. Last season, he was on the Colts, and in the limited games that he did play, he didn't look all that great. He did look like somebody that was pushing 40 at quarterback. Um, Also in the offseason, they brought in Kenny Pickett, who is now on his third team in 4 seasons, and is somebody that couldn't, keep the starting job in Pittsburgh when they were struggling at quarterback. And if you don't like either of those options, they do have 2 guys that they drafted in Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round of the draft and Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round of the draft. But they're both rookies. You don't really know what you're going to get from them. Like, if one of those rookies hits, or if Joe Flacco plays like he did 2 years ago, this team could compete for a playoff spot because they have all the talent they need and they have very good coaching. But their main question mark is at quarterback. And if Joe Flacco goes out and he plays like he did last year, where he doesn't look good, or if they go with Kenny Pickett and Kenny Pickett doesn't play well, or the rookies that he drafted, neither one of them really shows that they're the guy, then this is a team that, regardless of how talented they are, could be in the running for the number 1 overall pick next season. So, so those are my sleeper teams for the for the AFC going into the 2025 NFL season. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any sleeper teams that you can think of for the AFC. And next week or later this week, I will get into my NFC sleeper teams. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.